know what portrait mode is going to do.
I like it. Did we get an eyeball?
Yes.
We got an eyeball.
Hello, listener, and welcome to the Here and Now. I would like you to take a moment, if you can, to just stop, feel your feet, feel your calves, feel your knees, feel your thighs, feel your hips, feel your stomach, feel your lungs and your chest. Take a breath, breathe it in, feel your shoulders, relax your shoulders, feel your neck, feel your head resting on top of all of that, and just relax into your body. Smell whatever it is around you. Listen to the sounds going on. Take a look around you. This is it. This is the here and now. This is what your life is right now. None of your thoughts about it. Just the experience of it. This is the here and now. And as much as I've welcomed you to it, you never left.
Mm-hmm. And isn't that just informative, and wonderful to remind ourselves of that we're always here. And even when we feel lost in thought and we feel like we're stuck there and how do I be more present? How do I be more here? It's like, yeah, you don't have to be, you know. As much as you can think you need to be, you don't. And what you think is optional, not required. And even when you can be so certain, still there's room for fresh perspectives, and in that there is an opportunity to expand the way that we think or expand the feeling of being here. But in expanding the feeling, it doesn't change the geography. Metaphorically, we are always here, but our experience of here can deepen the more our perspective expands and the more considerations that are taken, and not you becoming more, but the feeling of being able to take in more of everything that is always here.
Oh, for sure. Because when you are paying more attention to, the environment that you're in, and that's where, the focus is, the real things that are happening in your life, not the things that you're thinking about, not the things that are in your head, but like the things that are actually happening. And there's more of an ability to be attentive to those things. There's more energy available to, work on things and focus on things. And so, yeah, it's, you never do, you never do leave it, but we can certainly get, focused on things in our head that can feel, soothing to us when we are here. And like, for whatever reason you would want a distraction even, but it's like, there's no use in that. The distractions don't benefit you from being able to, handle and face uncertainty and deal with reality and life. And so, yeah, it doesn't make much sense to not be here, to not be focused on exactly what you're doing in the moment.
Yeah, well, and there's, aside from the distraction part, there's also just, I guess, this feeling that here and now is not enough. And we think it's because things need to change in our lives. But what's really driving the emotion behind that is the fact that we believe that we're not enough because the here and now is not enough. Like the circumstances of our here and now mean something about us. because there is nothing wrong with making a conscious choice to change your life. There is nothing wrong with choosing to leave a job. There's nothing wrong to choosing to move somewhere new or make a new friend or get into a new relationship or end a relationship or any of those things. There's nothing wrong with any of that. Those are all decisions that any human being is going to make in their lifetime. Why then do they hurt so much? Why then do we suffer through so much of that, other than the fact that things mean something about us? It's not just that we're making decisions. No. It's that I am doing either the right thing, wrong thing. And by virtue of doing the right thing or the wrong thing, I am the right me or the wrong me.
And how far, like how much of your life is spread across, other people too, doing the right thing according to who? Because if it's not according to you, then it's according to someone else, some other perspective, or even just assumptions that you have. Because most of it, that's all you got, outside of your own perspective and your opinions or focuses or thoughts. Even like all you have outside of that are assumptions. There isn't really anything that isn't an assumption beyond that. And so you are alone in that sense of your experience and making choices and making decisions and looking to yourself and trusting yourself and having faith in yourself. And there's a there's a beauty in that sort of freedom, from needing to, not to say not be considerate of life and people and everything, but not as considerate of their opinions of you, I guess, is the difference. And a lot more opens up, when it isn't so much about someone else's opinion.
I mean, but it's really our opinion. It's, as much as I'd want to credit other people, it's my opinion that I'm crediting to them. And in that, it leaves little for me to do, right? Because now I am, by default at the mercy of other people's opinions. That would mean nothing to me if my opinion didn't agree with theirs first, right? Because if somebody judges you for, being like a terrible unicyclist, but you've never sat on a unicycle, you wouldn't care that they're like, you are the worst unicyclist that walks the earth. And you're like,
how am I going to?
I'm okay with that. You're like, I'm
I'm
okay.
just speaking personally.
Right? I'm not going to lose any sleep over that. So my unicycling career is over. Oh, well. But if someone is like, I think that you are a terrible sister, right? That might sting, because on some level I have agreed that I could be a better sister. And then if I were to hold on to just that and all that's harmless, there's always room for improvement and progress, right? But in that, that's still masquerading an insecurity about not being a good sister. And that's why the goal is there to be a better sister. And it's already implying that I'm a bad sister that could do more, that could do better. And so when that opinion comes back to me, or when that opinion is reflected back to me, I credit the reflection to itself and not to what the reflection is reflecting back, right? So it's almost like I'm saying that the reflection is the mirror's fault, instead of seeing that there would be no reflection if I wasn't standing in front of it. But I'm crediting the mirror. I'm saying that reflection is the mirror, and it's not. The mirror is reflecting what I've given it. And so even though it looks like it's coming towards me from an external force, that's only like boomeranging back.
Absolutely. We have a comment in the live stream, and of course, since this is an episode of Raw,
Indeed,
we wanted to get to this, and this one seems to
hello.
be, it's a good one.
Okay.
So, sorry to disrupt. No reason to be sorry. We're glad you're here. I'm feeling super depressed right now. Before we go anywhere, I just want to say, you gonna be all right? The sooner you know it's going to pass, the sooner it will start to pass. It just feels heavy because you're putting a lot of investment in it. Give that a little bit of time, you'll feel better shortly. I watched some videos of Robert Sapolsky and really liked him, so I bought his book, Behave, The Biology of Humans at Our Best and Worst. Okay. I loved it initially, but then I discovered that Sapolsky embraces determinism. Trying to digest determinism has been crushing for me. If we don't have free will, what's the point of anything? Jesus, nihilism seems nothing compared to this. Well, that's yeah. So I guess the point, determinism doesn't really make any sense because it's kind of like the idea of non-dual philosophy, where they're saying like there is no me. Well, there absolutely is. Like there's absolutely the experience and the reality of you. The conceptualization of you is a different thing, right? Because that can turn into anything. But the reality of you as existence is kind of beyond argument. So the determinism thing is basically implying that everything that you ever do is not just influenced by everything, but dictated by everything. And I would say that the reality of your experience is quite the opposite. You quite obviously have influence. You quite obviously have some degree of say in terms of response to whatever it is you are experiencing. And I say this right now because you're giving evidence of it in terms of your response to Sapolsky, your perspective of determinism, how heavy you're making it, the fact that you are more in the argument about your reality rather than being in your reality. So you have free will, obviously. So I don't think it's not necessarily as cut and dry as we would like it to be with determinism, because it's not that you are dictated, but you are certainly connected. We all have the same equal degree of quote unquote free will, but that free will is also influenced by everything we've ever experienced, because it's the context, or rather the spectrum, that we experience through. So we're always going to reflect things through the spectrum of our experience. And in that, you can see where our free will isn't exactly as free as we might like it. But then it comes down to the question of like, why do you need it to be that free when you obviously have choice all the time? And there again, it's just wanting to have a feeling about yourself in terms of independence, the ability to forge your own path, to be in control, to be able to make your own choices. You have the ability to make your own choices. That does not give you control. Mm-hmm. So I would say, like anything else, philosophy is the disease for which it should be the cure. And that's why when you start getting into concepts like this, take everything with a grain of salt. It sounds like it might have been an interesting book, but take it with a grain of salt. It's just another perspective on this. At the end of the day, it's up to you to actually come to terms with who you are and what this experience is. And that could take your whole lifetime. Nobody can do it for you. And what's worse, maybe nobody else is doing it. It's really on you. And so celebrate the unknown, celebrate the influence you do have, and just focus on paying attention moment to moment. And you will be surprised how much easier and lighter all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The decisions that we make, the choices that we make, there's always going to be ripples no matter what. And yeah, sometimes that assumption that you can have, and again, it's not to say that you don't have control in the sense that you just don't know how things are going to play out, or what's going to happen next, or what's around the corner. And so there's, I think, starts to be more of a sensitivity to the choices that you make, to the decisions that you make. And as you get more and more sensitive to, what is actually happening, there's more obvious choices, things that make more or less sense. And then, because neither have any control or guarantee for what's next, but there is the potential of impacts depending on usually how much you're making it about you, everything else, everything beyond yourself. And so those ripples yeah, those ripples play out in some way, shape, or form. And when you're making it about you, your environment's gonna start to reflect that. Um,
Hmm. Our environment always reflects our priorities. I used to have a flashcard that I taped to my wall, and it would say, priorities are never hidden. Because even if I say that the priority is something else, if I were to look at my life, I can pretty much see where I have allocated time and energy. So it's like, don't listen to what people say, watch what they do. And that's an old saying that comes back because it was very much like that, because people are quick to tell you something. And most of the time, and nothing, no red flags are raised. And it's usually because people are so engrossed and engulfed by the thinking of what their own thinking, that they don't notice what's happening around them. And so that's why it was so much, it was like you had to remind yourself, like, don't just listen to what people say. Watch what they're doing. Watch what your environment is reflecting, because it's always reflecting the priority of that moment. And that's not a good or bad thing. That is, it feels like a very objective way to describe moment to moments. Every moment reflects the priority of that moment. That doesn't really sound like a bad thing or a good thing. It just sounds like what is, it's, and as the priorities change, the environment changes. If all of a sudden I had a strong priority to painting, then I would start to reinforce that priority and collecting canvases and paints and paintbrushes, and very quickly my environment would reflect that priority to paint on a canvas.
mhm.
And that's just a very as a very literal example, but it's very much like, if the priority is me, the idea of me, then my life will reflect things that I attribute great value to the idea of me. So the relationships that I have with people are people that are also have share that priority. Birds of a feather tend to flock together. If I'm thinking, how can I get ahead, how can I get the most bang for my buck, it's I have to get the most value for myself, then I will tend to, my environment will reflect that. And it's not too surprising that I will also associate with people who share that priority, because my environment is reflecting that priority, which will include the people that I interact with.
And who can choose to, or rather, who will choose to continue to interact with you. I mean, this is one
Mhm.
thing, and I'm glad we're kind of circling back to this, because in the last 2 months of being here on the island, we've been very much out and about,
Mhm.
moment to moment, making the choice to either think about ourselves or not. And what I find magical and frankly miraculous is how incredible the series of events in my day to day life will be when I'm just without need, like without the
Mhm.
need for something to happen, without the need to be looked at a certain way, without the
Mhm.
need, like I just have a certain freedom. There's a certain degree of sensitivity to my moment to moment life that reflects in everyone that I talk to. And
Mhm.
in the last 2 months, we have made friends with so many locals, so many business
Yeah.
owners, so many artists, to the
Mhm.
point where recently one of the local business owners, a guy that we rather like and have hung out with a number of times, discussed us hosting karaoke in the very
Yeah.
near future,
Mhm.
Yeah.
which is great. But that wasn't the result of us going, hey, like this would be a great business idea.
Right.
It was the result of us going, this would be kind of fun. Give it a thought. It's going well in other places, and you got a dope location. And it was just a good conversation.
Yeah.
He had his own ideas and the whole thing, but it was a creative process. It wasn't the process of trying to get somewhere. There's no
Mhm.
end result in mind. Don't it'd be great, but even on his level, he's even saying like, let's see if it can go. Let's give it shit.
Mhm.
That's a very different thing than somebody who is, and I know these fucking people. I was one of these people. The how to win friends and influence people,
Oh,
or
yes.
that kind of guy, where you're giving business cards to everyone, shaking their
Uh-huh.
hand, looking them
Mm.
in the eye, doing the
Right.
whole deal.
48 Laws of
Oh
Yeah.
Power, all
yeah,
those books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
all of that
Checking all the boxes.
shit. And don't get me wrong, it's not that you can't accomplish things that way, but there's a cost to your life. There's a
Mhm.
cost to your level of ease. There's a cost to your level of authenticity, because you become
Mhm.
more and more driven by the need to get there. And that
Mhm.
means you become more and more driven to be the person you'll be when you get there. So now the person you are is even more not enough. And it
Mhm.
becomes this underlying drive. There's so much sacrificed in just needing to think about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So much. And I'm not saying you're not going to, and I'm not saying that if you're thinking about yourself, you should think about yourself negatively. What I'm saying is that there is more value in you taking a moment of confusion and just breathing through it until you can feel the wind on your skin or the ground underneath your feet than there ever will be in you trying to resolve the confusion by thinking about yourself. Because if you don't, it means you're dumb and you lack value and you don't know and all these things. That is just a cycle that never fucking ends. It never ends. And
Mm-hmm.
so to give that up, because that really is, when we're talking about free will, what do we really have? We have the emotional spectrum that goes with immediately thinking about the fiction of myself
Mhm.
versus the emotional freedom that having all of the emotions available to me because they're not anchored to any one story.
No.
Mhm.
So I can just be here. And that is so, because it's like you become the universal Swiss Army knife in terms of the emotional spectrum. You come across somebody, they're going through things because you're not committed to a narrative that creates a certain emotion. They're all there, and it's like it just flicks through the options and it finds the ones that match with the
Yeah.
person you're talking to because you're not anchored to one.
Mhm.
It's such an incredible way to live, but there's such an act of just faith. It's just a leap of faith.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. So I just wanted to say, as somebody who's practiced this decision to either make it about some fictional me or to accept that I'm just kind of habitually thinking about the fiction of me and that I don't need to give into it.
Yeah.
I've practiced this. It becomes an incredible experience, and your life will change in ways that you could never think, because everything you're thinking about is through the spectrum of your fear and need. That's the problem. That's all you're ever going to experience so long as you're focused on it, because that's what you're allowing yourself to see.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that. I also wanted to mention, because this is really cool. So the People's Choice Podcast Awards finished their
Yes.
voting process.
Yes.
We were in a number of categories this year. The last 2 years, we have been in the semifinal slate for the religion and spirituality category, which is great. Don't get me wrong. But on the other hand, kind of funny, because we are neither religious nor spiritual.
Nope.
And we talk about that at length. Um, this year, we are in 2 categories for the semifinal slate of the People's Choice Podcast Awards. We are in the leisure category, which I find so delightfully appropriate, because we're
Yes.
always talking about being in your life, relaxing, being yourself, getting
At
past
ease.
that thought about yourself. This works for everybody. Athletes love our channel, for example, just stuff like that. And then we're also in the society channel, which I can't imagine that being a better category, because what are we talking about here other than how each of us individually, by virtue of the shit we hold on to, create a collective ripple that is basically the world that we're experiencing.
Yeah.
So when we are talking about society, we're really talking about the individual.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love the fact that by talking about the individual, we are having a conversation about society. So I'm very excited to see how this goes. Don't give a shit if we win, as always, whatsoever. It's just cool to be in the semifinal slate, because there's a bunch of people who have never heard of the podcast who are now going to be told about the podcast because they're the last 20,000 semifinalist voters.
Yeah.
So welcome to the podcast. If this is you, excited to have you here. We hope that you enjoy the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see how that plays out with the semifinals there. But it is interesting how much we forget that society isn't something that's separate from us. Like, it can be such an easy way to pass off responsibility, or like, oh, human nature, society's this way, blah 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 blah. And so much of it is reflective of ourselves, our focuses, and we can pass it off in our head, but that's just us kind of passing off responsibility for things. And so yeah, everything's always going to be kind of directly reflective of where your priorities are, and how much attention you're giving to the world, your environment, as opposed to yourself, and how you're doing and measuring yourself. And if that is the case, if you do live where that tends to be your sole focus, then yeah, your experience will start to reflect that. And I've definitely, noticed in just my experience since being here, kind of feelings of, it's a new environment. I always took me a while to adapt, whether it was school or, camp or whatever, and just noticing how much I've thought about myself, over the last couple months, and just how I was doing, how my stuff was going. And, it's, I guess once you notice it, then it's like, stop doing that.
This time.
But that's what,
as well as accept why you're doing
yeah.
because it's not as you can't do the slap on the wrist. Oh, shouldn't be doing that without going, yeah, but this is why I'm doing that. Because once you go, this is why I'm doing that, then you can actually make a choice not to. Until you do that, really all you're doing is another knee-jerk response in the same way the other one was a knee-jerk response. Now you're like, oh, there's something here, I don't like it, I'm not going to do it. It's like, hold up, you didn't look at why you were doing it. So now you're just doing it in reaction to. You're not actually getting to the root of it, which means the next time you panic, the next time you're not thinking about it, you're just going to do it again. Right? Because if you don't get to the root, then you'll never get to the place before it happens. You'll always have to cope with it after it happens. Right? You'll have the thought and go, nope, don't do that, rather than seeing the thought come and never reacting to it to begin with.
Right. Because, yeah, if you're having certain thoughts and, don't respond to it immediately, there can be that sense of, control that you can feel for things, for what you share and express. But, a lot of it does come down to sensitivity, I guess, too. But then how much is that one way or another? How much is it assumption? How many things is that coming from? And a lot of times, if you're feeling tense in the moment that you're in, like, there's going to be certain thoughts that reflect that. And so I think asking yourself that first, are you tense? Are you afraid, worried, whatever? And it's like, there's going to be certain thoughts, certain things that pop up that are going to reflect that, and like, when you aren't so much, then they don't reflect that so much.
And that's the self-honesty part.
Yeah.
Is being willing to admit that you're tense. There really is something to that. Like, just the willingness to admit that you get worked up, because it's a big hit to the ego. Admittedly, that's really what it is. Like, we just don't like admitting to ourselves that we throw little tantrums. We don't like admitting that we still get caught up in things. We don't like admitting that sometimes we're not fucking rational. Yeah. We don't like admitting it. And so we never watch for it. Right? It's so important to recognize that, like, it's okay to be vulnerable with yourself, for fuck's sakes. Like, if you can't admit to yourself that you have insecurity, that's pretty insecure. Like, you're talking to yourself here. Who you hiding from? Like, if you can't admit to yourself that maybe you feel a little jealous here and there, maybe you feel like, you're not enough from time to time, maybe you react to thoughts in your head like they're real and they're not. If you can't admit that, then you're never going to see that you're doing it. You're never going to see why you're doing it. You're never going to do it. There's that cognitive dissonance. It won't reconcile against your need to look at yourself a certain way. That's really what it is. You need to be vulnerable. You need to be honest with yourself. I can be a real douchebag. I can be manipulative. I can be, dishonest to myself. Like, to admit that to yourself changes everything. It's the doorway to maturity. It's the doorway to freedom. It's just uncomfortable when you have a habitual pattern of avoiding it because it makes you feel bad. The sooner you deal with why it makes you feel bad, the sooner you stop doing it. And there's nothing left to feel bad about.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, because most of the time you see why you're doing something or focused on something or not expressing certain things. It's because you have certain ideas of yourself and it doesn't match those ideas. You don't want to see yourself in different ways or have the potential to be seen in other ways. And so even when you start being more yourself, you start feeling more relaxed, don't judge yourself as much. There can be swings with that where it's like, oh no, I can't just relax, I can't just express myself, I can't just be myself, despite it feeling almost more like you're being yourself. Like it isn't an external thing so much, it's the most natural thing you can do is just be yourself and not judge as you go. And yet it can feel like a foreign experience to just be cool.
Yeah.
Be cool with yourself, be cool with what you're doing, be cool with how you're living your life, be cool with expressing yourself. Like, yeah.
Mhm.
Like, what is that?
Yeah, we don't have to be in conflict. It's not that every moment is you're jumping for joy and you're always feeling quote unquote happy. You just not always in resisting. Not, you don't have to, it doesn't always have to feel like you're in a battle or that you're in a tug of war, that you're pushing, you're forcing. It doesn't have to feel like there's so much effort that needs to be given. It doesn't have to feel like there's so much work to do. And and in that, a lot of that work comes from what we think we have to control and things that we have to take care of. And that's we're so busy working towards making the moment what it's supposed to be that you don't even notice your tension. So you don't think to ask, am I being tense? And but it is always available. There's always an opportunity to check, you know am I feeling tense right now, or does it feel like it's okay?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, like, what do you mean by okay, other than just, it is what it is, right?
Yeah, not being in conflict.
Exactly. And that's, it's funny words, because you could use the word okay. I'm like, yeah, I get that. Somebody else is going to go, so feeling good. That's not quite what I meant, right? That's the problem with words. It really is. It sucks. The messenger is always a traitor for that one reason that you try and get something across, but the person's going to hear things according to where they are in their own journey. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what I mean, or what we've been talking about throughout this episode, is that someone can hear what you're saying through the lens of what they think it means about them, which means they're not actually hearing what you're saying. But how much are you doing that? How much are you listening for what they think about you rather than for what they're expressing? Because everybody's being quite honest when you really listen, when you look past what they think you need from them and how to, maybe please you, or how to defend themselves from their idea of you. When you look past all of the behaviors that are based on assumptions and based on their own self-image, when you look at what they're saying and how they're saying it and why it's being said, people are being very, very clear about their relationship with themselves. People are being very clear about their experience of being human. But it's being able to actually listen. And you can only listen if it's not about you.
Yeah, it's the only way you're going to be able to hear anyone, because if you feel like it's about you, that's what you hear. Like you hear what it means about some assumption, some imaginary friend that you got that exists in your head, because that's what is attempted to be protected You know, most of the time these days when certain decisions are made one way or the other, it's like, how much can I maintain whatever I assume that I am? And that can, you know, I don't know, not disconnect anything, but make you feel distanced from some sort of, you know, flow, like how things are going when you're more relaxed, like where things, you know, the ease to expression and living, depending on how much you're, you know, focused on some image that you have about yourself or some way that you prefer, you know, to see yourself. And without that, there's more that opens up, and then it's just a moment to moment sort of sensitivity based on, based on empathy. Yes, you know, it really is like that. If that is your driver, then it can lead the way, like moment to moment, which is a beautiful thing, because it's not like there's nothing to look to necessarily, but it's in yourself, in that sense of just putting yourself aside for a sec and prioritizing, you know, everything else, because that's your experience.
And you get super enthusiastic about it, and the only reason is because there's no weight. Because all the weight was about you, right? So if it's not there, all of a sudden you can do whatever the fuck you want, and you do it with fucking total focus and enthusiasm, because there's no reason not to.
Yeah, because you're the one who comes up with those reasons. Like, you come up with the reasons yourself not to do certain things, not to express yourself authentically, and just, you know, just be yourself and express whatever, you know, whatever it is that you're expressing, you know, whatever it is that you're sharing. I mean, it's redundant, but like, it's cool to be you. It's cool to trust yourself.
Yeah, and it makes a lot. It makes quote unquote decision making a lot less labored. It doesn't have to feel so difficult because there has nothing to do about the decision maker. You know, you're making a choice, and the chooser, the person making the choice, isn't even considered a priority anymore. It's just yes or no. You know, the option is there, and there's other options, and making a choice, picking one option, says nothing about the selector, right? Because it's just the priority is the option, not who's taking that option or what it means about the person or where that option is going to lead. And so, you know, life just feels less like a means to an end, and almost by default it feels like it becomes more meaningful, because there's a lot less pressure, there's a lot less of a return on that investment of that choice that's being considered. And so it doesn't feel like this option has to yield these results or has to make me feel this way or has to get this goal. It's just like, no, I've selected this option and I am in the process of letting that unfold however it unfolds, without it needing to go in a specific direction. So it feels like the choices and the options are just a lot lighter. There's just a lot less that has to come from them.
Yeah. And there's a lot less in terms of the resistance to the unknown. Like you really, because you're not thinking about yourself, now you're not necessarily worrying that you can't deal with things. It's the problem with it, right? And I said this in a video on TikTok that I don't really worry about the unknown because I know I'm the one thing that will always be there. I'm the unknown at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's all I need to know.
Yeah.
Right. And I can just be myself and we'll continue to carry on. That's all it is. It's just that we want to have an idea that we're enough going forward. And there's just too many variables. There's too many unknowns. And as soon as you start thinking about them all, it's just a matter of time until you get to the ones that you're afraid of. You know, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh God, I got to deal with that. I got to deal with my fear of that. It's like, no, you can actually just stop looking at it. You don't have to keep staring at the scary picture. You don't, but as long as you are, the more your brain's going to start convincing yourself that it's real. That it's absolutely going to happen. That's the bitch about thoughts, right? Is that the more you look at them out of need and fear, the more you start to convince yourself that they're necessary.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be, that all that's ever going to be there. Obsession's a bitch. It really helps to just, again, remind yourself you can become obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
You can delve into shit and get lost in it. You can become irrational. It's a lot easier than trying to pretend like you never can, and trying to pretend, that if it happened to you, it would mean something about you and your mental health. No, we all go through shit. It's okay. But it's being able to know, like, no, going through the ups and downs and learning about myself from them enriches my life.
Mm-hmm.
It enriches my life. I may not like the process, but I certainly like the fruits of that process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important that we give ourselves the chance to actually reap those fruits,
Mm-hmm.
in order to recognize the point, or at least the flow of all of this, because it really doesn't mean anything about us. And until you recognize that, the only flow you feel is the back and forth of how invested you get in something that isn't you. But once you recognize that, then you start to actually feel the back and forth of reality, which is always here and now. Both ends of the spectrum exist here and now in potential all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You are both a bag of shit and fun to the universe.
Mm-hmm.
You can be the liar and the hero. You can be both and neither. They're all potential, and they're never you. They're only a thing you would do that then would not define you either, because it doesn't mean anything about you other than the ripple that you make. That is what remains. That's all. But we try to make that into an idea. We try to make that into a concept that grows over time instead of wipes itself clean and starts anew with everything it's picked up along the way. This has been a fun episode.
Mm-hmm.
I know we are coming to the end here. We've got like 2 minutes left. We are going to be taking a 15-minute break and continuing on Patreon. Got a tier 2 call today. We're coming into season 7 very shortly. We got some cool changes on the way. We got some things that are happening. So keep an eye out. We will be making some announcements on Patreon, and then, of course, on Discord as well. And we will let all of you know in the podcast as those changes come into play what the hell is happening. It's really exciting. Oh, and a quick shout out to our investors. Thank you so much for all of the all of the funding and all of the support and the encouragement, and of course your emails. We can't wait to share some of this news with you of what's been happening, but we'll leave that for now. Shout out to all of you, and I'm going to pass it over to Andrew and Amanda. I'm going to shut up, and thanks so much, everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a great chat about the ripples and the choices that we make and the opportunities to make different choices as you go, from learning from your decisions, from not making so many things about yourself. And throughout our lives, a lot of that structure of our mind is built around maintaining the idea. It's like the things I do, the ways that I spend my days and spend my time. And when you're not focusing on those things as much, there's opportunity to see yourself differently and to get some freedom moment to moment, to relax a little bit more, make more choices for yourself, because you know that everything outside of that is just a question mark. So it's very exciting to be able to just kind of live like that, a little bit more relaxed, a little bit less concerned with everything else. I mean, in one sense, yes, attentive to it, but not concerned. Yes. Yeah, it's been a fun chat.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us and discussing the option to look at our priorities and take in some considerations that might shift those priorities and therefore shift the ripples that we are always making. Look forward to seeing you guys soon, and Patreon in the next few minutes. But thanks for joining us, everyone. Bye.
Get out there, enjoy more of the here and the now. Take care.
Bye.